What you are about to hear was never meant to be made public. A highly shocking message from Jannik Sinner regarding Carlos Alcaraz has just been leaked, and it completely destroys everything we know about their rivalry. The professional tennis world is currently in a state of absolute panic. Carlos Alcaraz is officially out of Roland Garros. He is missing the biggest and most prestigious tournament on clay. The public narrative is heavily blaming a tragic right wrist injury. The official press releases talk endlessly about a sad withdrawal, physical pain, and a very difficult recovery period. The global media wants you to believe this is just a normal sports tragedy. They desperately want to protect the ultimate golden boy of Spain. But the reality behind closed doors is incredibly dark and highly disturbing. A sudden leak from deep inside the strictly guarded Italian training camp reveals a completely different story. Jannik Sinner is not sending warm wishes or feeling sorry for his biggest rival. The internal perspective from the Sinner team is entirely brutal. It is remarkably cold. It exposes a terrifying lack of sympathy for a completely broken opponent. This leaked information fundamentally changes the entire landscape of the ATP Tour. It instantly turns a supposedly friendly rivalry into a ruthless war for survival. We are no longer talking about two young athletes playing a gentlemanly game of tennis. We are witnessing the sudden birth of a vicious psychological battle. The stakes have never been higher for both players. But to understand the devastating weight of this leaked message, we first need to expose the massive lie the tennis media has been feeding you. For months, the tennis establishment has painted this beautiful, perfect picture of mutual respect between these two massive stars. You have seen the carefully staged photos at the net after long matches. You have read the highly polite social media posts crafted by their management teams. The PR machines working for Carlos and Jannik constantly push a fake narrative of a pure and healthy rivalry. They desperately want to recreate the noble era of the past. Tennis legends. They want the fans to believe in a brotherhood. When Carlos announced his devastating withdrawal from Paris, the public relations script went into full effect immediately across the globe. Official statements were issued rapidly, wishing the Spanish star a speedy recovery. The ATP Tour flooded the internet with heavily edited highlight videos celebrating their past epic matches. Everything looked perfectly normal and entirely respectful on the surface. Everyone played their assigned role in front of the flashing cameras. But the atmosphere inside the exclusive player areas at Roland Garros tells a completely different story today. The silence is incredibly heavy and highly uncomfortable. The PR teams are desperately trying to control a rapidly escalating situation behind the scenes. Let us look very closely at the exact moment Jannik Sinner received the news about Carlos missing the Paris tournament. Jannik was hitting heavy balls on a private practice court. His coaching staff approached him quietly with the breaking news. There was absolutely no shock on his face. There was no pause in his strict routine. He did not stop to express a single ounce of concern for a fellow competitor facing a massive career crisis. He simply nodded his head slowly, turned his back to the coaches, walked straight to the baseline, and hit another devastating forehand. His reaction was entirely emotionless. It was the highly calculated response of an apex predator watching a wounded rival fall permanently out of the race. This chilling and cold behavior completely shatters the illusion of their so-called friendship. The tennis media absolutely refuses to show you this terrifying reality. They refuse to acknowledge that the professional locker room is currently divided by extreme tension and fear. The massive corporate sponsors demand a perfectly clean image from these young athletes, but the players know the real truth. They know the polite handshakes are completely fake and entirely forced. If you want to know exactly how deep this locker room drama goes, what it truly means for the ultimate future of professional tennis, you must track our channel closely as we uncover the brutal truth week by week. That was the official, heavily filtered story, right until this leaked information shattered the illusion entirely. Let us break down exactly what has escaped from the strictly guarded Italian camp. The leaked information is absolutely ruthless. It completely strips away all the fake politeness we usually see on television. According to the internal leak, the team surrounding Jannik Sinner does not view this devastating right wrist injury as a tragic accident. They do not believe Carlos Alcaraz is simply experiencing a random run of bad luck. They view his massive physical collapse as an absolute and unavoidable consequence of his own reckless choices. The leaked message details a highly critical and surgical analysis of the entire Spanish tennis philosophy. The Italian camp allegedly describes the playing method of Carlos as highly undisciplined and entirely unscientific. They see a young player who relies purely on violent explosive energy, rather than calculated tactical precision. They believe the constant running and the brutal whipping of the forehand are massive fundamental flaws. This leaked perspective proves that Jannik has been waiting for this exact breakdown to happen for many months. He knew the biological clock was ticking loudly on his biggest rival. If we look closely at a long series of past events, this dark truth becomes completely obvious to anyone paying attention. Think back to their previous massive encounters on the hard courts last season. Notice the extremely cold and calculating stares Jannik directed at Carlos during the tense changeovers. Remember the highly cryptic comments Jannik made during recent press conferences about the absolute necessity of physical preservation and smart scheduling. Those were not just random passing thoughts. They were direct psychological bullets aimed straight at the Spanish camp. Jannik was subtly warning the entire world that his opponent was building a massive house of cards. Now that fragile house of cards has completely collapsed onto the red clay of Paris. The physical and tactical superiority of Jannik is now entirely undeniable. He moves across the baseline with extreme robotic efficiency. He wastes absolutely no energy on unnecessary sliding or wild jumping shots that thrill the crowds but destroy the human body. He protects his joints and his muscles with a highly disciplined technical foundation. Carlos does the exact opposite every single time he plays. He pushes his fragile joints past the absolute breaking point just to hit one spectacular winner for the cheering fans. The leaked conversation highlights this massive difference in professional maturity and long-term vision. The Italian team allegedly mocks the frantic and desperate energy of the Spanish coaching staff. They view Carlos not as a permanent long-term threat but as a temporary explosion that is rapidly burning itself out on the tour. This level of internal disrespect is completely staggering to hear. It proves that behind closed locker room doors, Jannik views Carlos with a chilling level of technical superiority. The Italian machine feels absolutely no sympathy for a player who refuses to respect the brutal biological limits of his own physical form. He sees a highly flawed competitor who finally met his inevitable physical destiny on the dirt courts. However, if you think this brutal message was only directed at Carlos Alcaraz, you are missing the most terrifying part of this entire situation. The truth is, Jannik Sinner is no longer just talking about the physical breakdown of Carlos Alcaraz. The real target of this leaked message is the entire professional tennis ecosystem. Jannik is using the total collapse of his biggest rival to send a massive and chilling warning to every single player on the ATP Tour. The message is incredibly clear and entirely undeniable. Anyone who attempts to challenge his ultimate throne with wild and violent tennis will be systematically destroyed. He is officially establishing a brand new world order on the prestigious courts of Roland Garros. The absolute absence of Carlos leaves a massive power vacuum in Paris. Jannik is not just stepping into that vacuum quietly. He is aggressively conquering it with cold and ruthless authority. He wants every single player in the locker room to look at the broken body of the Spanish star and feel absolute terror. He is sending a global signal that his calculated and highly scientific method is the only possible way to survive the grueling modern tour. If you try to fight the Italian machine with raw emotion and heavy topspin, you will end up exactly like Carlos. You will end up sitting in a sterile hospital room watching television, while Jannik lifts the massive championship trophies. This brings us to the most devastating twist of this entire drama. The highly guarded Italian camp does not simply lose confidential information by accident. The security around Jannik is notoriously tight and highly professional. So how did this highly damaging message suddenly escape to the public right before a major Grand Slam tournament? The dark reality is that this was incredibly likely a highly intentional leak designed to inflict maximum pain. The Italian machine wanted this exact message to reach the ears of Juan Carlos Ferrero and his severely injured player. They wanted to deliver a fatal psychological blow, while Carlos is completely trapped in a highly vulnerable physical state. They want to absolutely crush the spirit of the Spanish camp before Carlos even begins his long and painful rehabilitation process. This is the ultimate form of psychological warfare deployed at the absolute highest level of professional sports. I want to ask all the hardcore tennis fans watching this massive drama unfold right now. Do you believe Jannik intentionally leaked this brutal message to permanently destroy the confidence of Carlos? And can any player on the tour actually survive this ruthless new era of Italian dominance? Drop your honest opinions down below. because the entire tennis community needs to debate this terrifying shift in ultimate power. By purposely exposing his own cold and calculating mindset, Jannik is establishing total mental dominance over the rest of the tour. The other players are watching this brutal execution of character, and they are quickly realizing they are completely defenseless against his brilliant tactics. Players like Alexander Zverev are witnessing the absolute destruction of the Spanish Golden Boy, and they are feeling the immense pressure weighing heavily on their own shoulders. The bright shadow of Carlos has been completely erased from the red dirt of Paris. The loyal fans who bought expensive tickets, expecting a massive clash, Titans are now witnessing a solitary king ruling over a terrified kingdom. The Italian star has transformed from a quiet competitor into an absolute warlord of the tennis world. He is using the massive media chaos surrounding the injured Spaniard as high-octane fuel for his own unstoppable campaign. He is showing absolutely zero mercy to the fallen Prince of Clay. This chilling realization is currently sending massive shockwaves through every single locker room inside Roland Garros. The reaction from the Spanish camp regarding this leaked information has been a heavy, suffocating silence. Juan Carlos Ferrero is a highly proud and incredibly fierce competitor. He guided his young player to the absolute peak of the tennis world with massive passion and intense dedication. Now he is forced to sit in the dark shadows and absorb this highly toxic and humiliating blow from the Italian team. The silence from Ferrero is not a sign of peace or acceptance. It is a deeply bitter and explosive silence. The Spanish camp is completely locked down right now. They are refusing to answer any questions from the global sporting press. They know that any public response will only feed the massive media fire currently burning down their reputation. But the internal psychological damage to Carlos Alcaraz is almost impossible to calculate today. Imagine sitting in a sterile rehabilitation clinic with a broken wrist and discovering that your ultimate rival feels absolutely no respect for your physical struggles. Imagine realizing that the player you respected the most actually views your entire tennis philosophy as a massive joke. This is a highly devastating emotional strike directly to the heart of the young champion. Carlos is famous for playing with immense joy and a massive smile on his face. He feeds on the positive energy of the crowds and the mutual respect of his peers. This brutal leak completely destroys that innocent worldview forever. He is suddenly waking up to the incredibly dark and unforgiving reality of the ATP Tour. The pressure to heal his physical body was already immense. Now he must also carry the crushing weight of a massive bruised ego and a severely wounded national pride. The entire country of Spain relies on Carlos to carry the torch of their legendary tennis history. They expect him to fight back like a warrior. But how do you fight back when your physical body is failing and your biggest rival is publicly mocking your ultimate downfall? The mental rehabilitation will now take much longer than the physical healing process. Carlos must completely rebuild his shattered confidence from absolute zero. He has to find a brand new source of motivation deep inside his own soul. He is watching Jannik Sinner march smoothly through the draw at Roland Garros without breaking a single sweat. Every single victory for the Italian is a fresh knife twisting directly in the open wound of the Spanish team. The friendly rivalry is completely dead and buried in the red dirt. The polite smiles are gone forever. The battle lines are now permanently drawn in the sand. But one massive, terrifying question remains unanswered. We are witnessing the absolute destruction of a friendly rivalry right before our very eyes. The heavily filtered corporate illusion of the ATP Tour has been completely ripped away by this single leaked message. We are finally seeing the naked and brutal truth of professional tennis at the absolute highest level. This new era of the sport is officially drenched in deep hostility and cold calculation. The legendary two-horse race that the media desperately tried to sell us is currently hanging by a very thin thread. The future of this massive global sport now rests entirely on how Carlos Alcaraz responds to this ultimate public humiliation. Will he allow the cold dominance of Jannik Sinner to completely break his spirit and end his reign permanently? Or will he use this highly toxic and disrespectful message as the ultimate rocket fuel to resurrect his dying career? We are waiting to see if the Golden Boy of Spain can transform into a ruthless and calculating killer on the court. He must completely reinvent his entire tactical approach and harden his mind against the incredibly cold Italian machine. The next time these two massive superstars face each other across the net, the tension will be absolutely suffocating. There will be no friendly banter in the locker room. There will be no shared jokes during the warm-up routines. It will be pure and absolute war. The entire world will be watching to see if the wounded king can reclaim his stolen throne or if he will simply fade into the dark background of history as a tragic failure. The physical pain in his right arm is nothing compared to the burning desire for ultimate revenge that is surely growing inside him right now. Will Carlos ever return to silence his ultimate rival? Or is the era of Jannik Sinner officially unbreakable? To discover the final answer to this massive sporting tragedy and follow every single twist in this bitter war for tennis supremacy, you must hit subscribe right now and join us for the next explosive update.